Behind the twang of guitars and heartfelt lyrics, country music has always carried more than broken hearts. It's carried grudges. From bitter rivalries on stage to hidden betrayals behind studio doors, these feuds didn't just split friendships, they tore Nashville itself apart. In this video, we uncover 12 of the nastiest, most explosive conflicts in country history, where loyalty shattered, tempers flared, and legends drew their battle lines. Tarp 1. Toby Keith versus the Dixie Chicks, the war that divided Nashville. Few feuds in country music history ever burned as bright or as publicly as the one between Toby Keith and the Dixie Chicks. What started as a clash of opinions soon spiraled into one of the most infamous cultural battles ever to hit Nashville. It was 2003, and the U.S. was deep into the Iraq War. Patriotism was running high, and no artist embodied that spirit more than Toby Keith. His single, courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, The Angry American, became an anthem for American pride, bold, raw, and unapologetic. But not everyone in country music was waving the same flag. On the other side stood the Dixie Chicks, Natalie Maines, Marty McGuire, and Emily Robison, a trio known for their powerful harmonies and outspoken minds. During a concert in London, Maines made a comment that would change their careers forever. "We're ashamed that the President of the United States is from Texas." That one sentence sent shockwaves through the American heartland. Radio stations boycotted their music. Fans smashed CDs in parking lots. And in the middle of the storm, Toby Keith fired back, hard. Keith publicly blasted the group, accusing them of betraying their country and their fans. In retaliation, the Dixie Chicks mocked Keith on stage by showing a slideshow of him with Saddam Hussein, a move that enraged his supporters even more. It was no longer about politics, it was personal. Keith called Maines a spoiled little girl, while Maines labeled his hit song ignorant. Their feud became a national headline, transforming from a Nashville dispute into a symbol of America's deep cultural divide in the early 2000s. But behind the chaos lay something deeper: the fragile identity of country music itself. For decades, country had stood for unity, shared values, faith, small-town loyalty. Now it was being torn apart between tradition and rebellion, patriotism and protest. The Dixie Chicks' career took a massive hit. They were blacklisted from many radio stations for years. Yet ironically, that same feud transformed them into symbols of free speech and artistic courage. For Toby Keith, the controversy only cemented his image as the unapologetic voice of Middle America. His concerts sold out, his songs soared, and his fans rallied behind him. The feud never truly ended. It just cooled into silence as the years passed. But its echoes still linger in Nashville's memory. The year when country music stopped being just about songs and became a battleground for beliefs. It wasn't just a fight between a man and a band. It was a war for the soul of country music. 2. Garth Brooks versus Travis Tritt, the battle for country's soul. In the early 1990s, country music was at a crossroads. On one side stood tradition, fiddles, steel guitars, and songs about heartbreak. On the other, a new wave of arena-filling superstars was transforming Nashville into something bigger, flashier, and louder. No one embodied that shift more than Garth Brooks, the Oklahoma-born phenomenon who brought pyrotechnics, rock energy, and showmanship to country stages. And no one opposed it more fiercely than Travis Tritt, the rough-edged outlaw who believed country was losing its grit. Their feud began quietly, with a few words in interviews. Tritt, never one to hold his tongue, called out what he saw as a dangerous drift toward pop. When Garth performed on national TV wearing jeans tighter than any cowboy had before, Tritt jabbed that Brooks looked more like an MTV act than a man from Nashville. The comment made headlines, and fans quickly took sides. To the old guard, Tritt was defending authenticity. To the new generation, he was attacking progress. Garth Brooks, usually diplomatic, tried to ignore the noise. But as his fame skyrocketed, selling millions of albums, selling out stadiums, Tritt's criticism became impossible to ignore. He accused Brooks of selling out and turning country into a product for suburban moms, not true fans. Garth finally responded with calm precision. "I'm not changing country music. I'm showing how wide it can be." That statement drew a line in the sand. Behind the public sparring, though, lay two very different visions of country. Garth believed the genre could evolve, mixing pop production and heartfelt storytelling to reach the world. Tritt clung to the outlaw spirit, to the dirt, whiskey, and pain that made country real. In many ways, their clash represented Nashville's internal identity crisis. The feud peaked when Brooks swept the 1992 ACM Awards, dominating every category. Tritt, who had once shared the stage with legends like Waylon Jennings, vented his frustration publicly. "If this is what country music's becoming, maybe I don't belong here." That remark hit hard, framing Garth not as an artist, but as a threat to the genre's soul. Ironically, time would prove both men right. Garth Brooks opened doors for modern megastars like Luke Bryan and Shania Twain, showing country could compete with pop and rock. Yet Travis Tritt's warnings weren't hollow either, because in the decades that followed, critics would lament the loss of that raw, rugged authenticity he fought for. Their feud eventually cooled into respect, but it left a permanent scar, a reminder that country's biggest battles aren't fought on stage, but in the heart of what it means to be real. Top 3. George Jones versus Tammy Wynette, Love, Lies, and the Loneliest Feud in Country History. Before their feud, there was love, the kind of love that built legends and broke hearts. George Jones and Tammy Wynette were country music's golden couple, the king and queen of heartbreak ballads. Their voices blended like destiny. Their songs, Golden Ring, We're Gonna Hold On, sounded like living proof that pain could be turned into poetry. But behind the microphones and magazine covers, their marriage was falling apart under the weight of addiction, fame, and betrayal. George was already a troubled genius, a man whose voice could melt hearts but whose drinking could destroy lives. Tammy, the first lady of country music, was ambitious, disciplined, and determined to keep her career afloat. Their love burned fast and fierce, but by the mid-1970s, it had turned toxic. George's erratic behavior, fueled by alcohol and paranoia, made home life impossible. Tammy filed for divorce in 1975, but what followed wasn't peace, it was war. Unlike other celebrity breakups, this one unfolded through music. Each began releasing songs that cut like knives. Tammy sang Till I Can Make It on My Own, which sounded like a widow's farewell. George responded with the grand tour, dripping with bitterness and regret. Fans devoured the drama. Country's favorite couple was now dueling through heartbreak anthems. Then came the real scandal. Tammy accused George of violent behavior, even alleging he once chased her through the house with a loaded rifle. George denied it, but his reputation suffered. Nashville turned its back on him for years, while Tammy used her heartbreak to deepen her public image as the eternal victim of love gone wrong. They rarely spoke, except through songs and interviews that reopened old wounds. Yet, in a twist only Nashville could write, their musical chemistry never died. The public demanded duets, and reluctantly, they reunited on stage and in the studio. Watching them perform Two-Story House, you could feel both nostalgia and tension, love and resentment intertwining like melody and harmony. By the 1990s, time softened their feud. George sobered up, Tammy's health declined, and they found a quiet truce before her death in 1998. In interviews, George called Tammy the greatest singer I ever knew, his voice trembling with remorse. But for many, their story remains a haunting reminder that in country music, the line between art and reality is razor thin. Their feud wasn't fought with fists or insults. It was fought in verses, choruses, and broken hearts. A love story turned battlefield, leaving behind the most bittersweet legacy Nashville ever witnessed. 4. Waylon Jennings versus the Nashville establishment. The outlaw who broke the chains before the 1970s, Nashville ran like a factory. Artists didn't question producers, and producers didn't question the system. Every song had to fit a formula, short, radio-friendly, and polished enough for the Grand Ole Opry. But then came Waylon Jennings, a man who refused to play by anyone's rules. His deep voice, leather jackets, and wild energy were a rebellion against the plastic perfection of the Nashville sound. And when he declared war on the establishment, it wasn't just about music, it was about artistic freedom. Waylon's feud with Nashville began when record executives at RCA tried to mold him into a clean-cut star. They chose his songs, dictated his arrangements, and even controlled his studio time. But Waylon wasn't born for obedience. Raised in Texas honky-tonks, he wanted to record with his own band, to capture the raw, untamed sound of real life. RCA refused. So Waylon did the unthinkable. He fought back. With his friend Willie Nelson by his side, Waylon demanded complete creative control, something unheard of in Nashville at the time. The label resisted, warning him he'd ruin his career. Waylon's response became legend. "Then I'll ruin it my way." That defiance sparked what would become known as the outlaw movement, a rebellion that tore the Music City establishment apart. His 1973 album Honky Tonk Heroes marked the turning point. Recorded on his terms with his band, it was gritty, honest, and nothing like the polished hits dominating the charts. Nashville executives hated it. Fans, however, loved it. The album exploded, proving that country listeners were hungry for authenticity over perfection. Suddenly, the industry had to listen because Waylon's rebellion was making money. Behind the scenes, the feud turned personal. Opry insiders criticized him as unprofessional, radio programmers called him too rough, and producers whispered that he'd never last. But with every insult, Waylon grew stronger. He wore the word outlaw like a badge of honor, inspiring an entire generation of artists, from Merle Haggard to Hank Williams Jr., to stand up for themselves. In 1976, when Wanted, the Outlaws became the first country album ever to go platinum. Nashville was forced to surrender. The rebels had won. Waylon had cracked open the system from the inside, and his victory changed country music forever. His feud with Nashville wasn't about hate. It was about freedom. Waylon Jennings didn't destroy the establishment. He redefined it. He gave country back its backbone, its grit, and its soul. And though Nashville eventually embraced him, it never quite tamed him, because some cowboys were born to ride alone. Our 5. Miranda Lambert versus Blake Shelton, when love turned to lyrics. Once upon a time, they were country's golden couple, two chart-topping stars whose chemistry burned bright on and off stage. Miranda Lambert and Blake Shelton embodied what Nashville loved most: passion, authenticity, and a hint of rebellion. But when their marriage collapsed in 2015, the fallout didn't stay private. It became one of country music's most public and emotionally charged feuds, fought not through interviews or tabloids, but through songs, performances, and the silence that followed. Their love story had always been complicated. They met while performing together on CMT's 100 Greatest Duets, both already in relationships. The attraction was instant and undeniable. When they finally married in 2011, fans saw it as a match made in honky-tonk heaven. But fame is a cruel companion. Between constant touring, TV commitments, and media pressure, the cracks began to show. Rumors of infidelity surfaced, first about Blake, then about Miranda. Each denied wrongdoing, but the trust had already splintered. When the divorce came, it was sudden and brutal. No warning, no drawn-out negotiations, just a press release and a storm of speculation. But the true battle began afterward, when both turned their heartbreak into art. Miranda poured her pain into The Weight of These Wings, an album full of quiet confessions and emotional wreckage. Every lyric felt like a scar. "You can't ride in my little red wagon" wasn't just a line, it was a message. Blake, meanwhile, channeled his side of the story into the single She's Got a Way with Words, filled with biting sarcasm about betrayal and bitterness. To fans, it was clear. These songs were aimed at each other. Nashville's favorite lovebirds had become rivals, and every track release reignited the drama. Then came the new relationships that kept the feud alive. Blake's romance with pop star Gwen Stefani, who he met on The Voice, thrust the story into tabloid overdrive. Miranda's fans accused him of moving on too fast, while Blake's defenders claimed he had endured years of emotional turmoil. For nearly a decade, their names remained inseparable in headlines, even as they tried to escape each other's shadows. Behind the spectacle, though, lay something raw and deeply human. Both artists turned heartbreak into some of the best music of their careers. Miranda's vulnerability redefined modern female country, while Blake's rise on television made him a household name. But together, their feud revealed the price of fame and how love, once public, can never truly be private again. In Nashville, love songs often end with tears. For Miranda and Blake, those tears became verses, and those verses became their revenge. Number 6. Jason Aldean versus Maren Morris, a culture war in cowboy boots. In the modern era of country music, few feuds have exposed the deep cultural divide within Nashville, quite like Jason Aldean versus Maren Morris. What began as a debate over a music video spiraled into a national controversy, one that blurred the line between artistry, politics, and personal belief. It wasn't just a feud between two singers. It was a mirror reflecting the soul of country music in a divided America. The storm began in the summer of 2023 when Jason Aldean released Try That in a Small Town. The song, with its fiery lyrics and defiant tone, championed small-town values and resistance to chaos. But its accompanying video sparked outrage. Filmed in front of a courthouse known for past racial violence, critics accused Aldean of glorifying vigilante justice and stoking racial tension. While many fans defended him as a patriot standing up for traditional values, others saw the video as a dangerous throwback to a darker time. Enter Maren Morris, one of country's most outspoken and progressive voices. She didn't hold back. In interviews and on social media, she condemned the song as lame and dangerous, calling out what she saw as toxic nostalgia disguised as pride. Her comments went viral, drawing both praise and vitriol. Within days, she was labeled un-American by Aldean's defenders, and the feud escalated into a cultural firestorm. Aldean, never one to shy away, doubled down. He dismissed the criticism as bullshit, saying the song simply celebrated community and self-reliance. Conservative media rallied behind him, framing him as a victim of cancel culture. Meanwhile, Maren found herself at the center of a progressive movement within Nashville. Artists and fans who wanted to challenge the genre's old narratives. But this wasn't just about two artists. It was about what country music stood for in the 21st century. On one side, Aldean's fans saw him as the defender of small-town pride. On the other, Morris became the voice of a younger generation, demanding inclusion, empathy, and change. The feud spilled into award shows, interviews, and even red carpets, where subtle snubs and pointed lyrics replaced direct confrontation. Eventually, Maren Morris announced she was leaving country music for now, citing the genre's resistance to progress. Aldean, meanwhile, continued to dominate charts and headlines, his fan base more loyal than ever. Their clash revealed that Nashville wasn't just divided by taste, it was divided by ideology. In truth, the Aldean-Morris feud was less about who was right and more about what country music wanted to be. Was it a safe haven for tradition or a space for evolution? In the echo of that question, the feud still burns quietly, a reminder that in today's Nashville, even a song can start a war. 7. Morgan Wallen versus the industry, the rebel who couldn't be canceled. If one feud defines the tension between country music's old guard and its unstoppable new generation, it's Morgan Wallen versus the industry. It's a story of talent colliding with controversy, of a man both condemned and celebrated, and of an establishment forced to reckon with the power of the people. Wallen's saga isn't just about a single scandal. It's about how Nashville's moral compass was tested and how one artist's downfall became the biggest comeback in modern country history. In early 2021, Morgan Wallen was at the peak of his career. His album Dangerous, the double album, had shattered streaming records, and his mix of traditional twang and modern swagger had made him the face of a new generation of country fans. But one February night, everything changed. A video surfaced showing Wallen using a racial slur outside his home. Within hours, radio stations dropped his music, his label suspended him, and the Country Music Association disqualified him from awards consideration. Nashville's reaction was swift and severe. For a moment, it seemed his career was over. But something unexpected happened. Instead of fading away, Wallen's album sales soared. Fans, many of them from the small towns that had made him famous, rallied behind him, buying and streaming his songs in protest. To them, the industry's punishment felt hypocritical and elitist. Country radio might have silenced him, but the people didn't. Within weeks, Dangerous climbed back to #1 on the charts, breaking records that even Nashville's veterans couldn't ignore. Behind the scenes, the feud between Wallen and the country establishment deepened. Executives worried his success despite cancellation would damage the industry's image. Artists like Maren Morris and Mickey Guyton condemned the fan response as tone-deaf. But others, quietly, admitted that Wallen had exposed a truth. Country music was no longer controlled by Nashville's gatekeepers. It was being driven by fans with streaming apps and social media megaphones. When Wallen returned to the stage a year later, he did so with humility, publicly apologizing and pledging to learn from his mistakes. Yet his success only grew. His 2023 album, One Thing at a Time, broke global records, and his tours sold out stadiums faster than any country act since Garth Brooks. Nashville's attempt to cancel him had backfired spectacularly, but beneath the numbers, the scars remain. Many in the industry still view Wallen as a cautionary tale about accountability. Others see him as proof that country music's power now lies in the hands of the people. Either way, his feud with the industry redefined the landscape, shifting control from corporate boardrooms to grassroots fandom. In the end, Morgan Wallen didn't just survive the system, he exposed it. His story isn't about redemption alone. It's about rebellion, forgiveness, and the unstoppable will of country music's most unpredictable son. Number 8, Taylor Swift versus Big Machine Records, the battle for her own voice. No feud in modern Nashville history has resonated louder or lasted longer than Taylor Swift versus Big Machine Records. What began as a business dispute evolved into a defining cultural moment about ownership, power, and creative freedom. It wasn't just about one artist fighting a label. It was about an entire generation of musicians watching one of their own stand up to the machinery that had controlled them for decades. Taylor Swift signed with Big Machine Records when she was just 14. Under the guidance of label founder Scott Borchetta, she became country's youngest superstar, rewriting the rules of the genre with songs that blended diary-like honesty with pop hooks. Hits like Love Story and You Belong With Me made her the face of a new era in country music, and Big Machine reaped the rewards. But as Taylor matured, so did her desire for control. She began to realize that while she wrote every word and melody, she didn't own the rights to any of her recordings. When her contract with Big Machine expired in 2018, Taylor tried to buy back her master recordings, but Borchetta refused to sell them to her directly. Instead, he sold the entire label, and with it her entire music catalog, to Scooter Braun, a manager known for his connections to pop powerhouses like Justin Bieber and Kanye West, two men with whom Taylor had already clashed publicly. The sale felt personal, like betrayal disguised as business. Taylor took to social media, writing, "All I could think about was the incessant, manipulative bullying I've received at his hands for years." Her words set off an earthquake in the music world. Fans erupted in outrage, demanding justice. Artists from across genres, including Kelly Clarkson, Halsey, and Casey Musgraves, joined the conversation. The feud between Taylor Swift and Big Machine had become bigger than contracts. It was about who gets to own their art. In response, Taylor launched one of the boldest moves in music history. She announced she would re-record all 6 of her early albums, reclaiming ownership one track at a time. Critics called it impossible, but one by one, she released Fearless, Taylor's version, Red, Taylor's version, and Beyond. Each a commercial triumph, each a direct blow to the original master's value. Big Machine and Braun lost millions in licensing opportunities, while Taylor's version soared to the top of charts worldwide. Behind the glamour and success, though, the feud marked a turning point for Nashville. It forced labels to confront an uncomfortable truth. Artists were no longer powerless. Taylor had rewritten the rules, proving that in the streaming age, integrity could outweigh contracts, and ownership could be reclaimed through determination. What began as a bitter feud became a revolution. In fighting for her music, Taylor Swift didn't just reclaim her songs. She reclaimed her story. 9. Hank Williams Jr. versus Nashville producers, the rebel son who refused to conform. If there was ever a man born to fight against the mold of Nashville, it was Hank Williams Jr. The son of a legend, he grew up in the shadow of one of country music's most sacred names, Hank Williams Sr. From an early age, Nashville producers wanted him to be a carbon copy of his father. Same songs, same twang, same tragic charm. But Hank Jr. was never built to be a ghost. His feud with the Nashville establishment wasn't just about music. It was about identity, rebellion, and a desperate struggle to be his own man. By the late 1960s, the industry had turned Hank Jr. into a nostalgia act. Every concert demanded the same old hits, Your Cheatin' Heart, I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry. He sang them dutifully, but behind the polite smiles, frustration grew. They didn't want Hank Williams Jr., he later said. They wanted Hank Williams reincarnated. Nashville saw him as an extension of a brand, not as an artist with his own soul. Everything changed in 1975. After a near-fatal mountain climbing accident in Montana left his face shattered, Hank Jr. disappeared from the spotlight. That brush with death gave him clarity and fury. When he came back transformed. Gone were the rhinestone suits and sentimental songs. In their place stood a defiant outlaw with dark glasses, a beard, and a booming southern rock sound. The Nashville producers who had once controlled his every move were horrified. He was too loud, too political, too unpredictable. They told him he'd never get airplay again if he kept pushing this new image. Hank Jr. didn't care. He aligned himself with the outlaw movement, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, Johnny Paycheck, and began carving out a space that was completely his own. His 1979 album, Family Tradition, was a middle finger to Nashville conformity and a proud declaration of independence. Songs like Whiskey Bent and Hellbound and A Country Boy Can Survive weren't just hits. They were manifestos. The feud between Hank Jr. and the Nashville producers deepened throughout the 1980s as he continued to dominate without their blessing. While polished stars filled the radio, Hank Jr. filled stadiums. His songs spoke to a working-class audience that felt ignored by corporate country, fans who saw him as one of their own. He didn't need Nashville's approval because he'd built his own empire outside of it. In the end, the very system that tried to control him was forced to acknowledge him. He won CMA Entertainer of the Year twice, sold millions of records, and became an enduring symbol of country rebellion. Hank Williams Jr. didn't just defy Nashville, he outlasted it. His feud wasn't fueled by hate, but by the fire of self-definition. And in the ashes of that battle, he proved that sometimes the only way to honor tradition. 10. Reba McEntire vs. Linda Davis, the duet that sparked jealousy and whispered rumors. Sometimes feuds in country music aren't fought with harsh words. They simmer beneath the surface, unspoken but deeply felt. Such was the case with Reba McEntire and Linda Davis, two powerhouse vocalists whose collaboration on one of country's greatest duets, Does He Love You, ignited years of speculation, rivalry, and rumor. What the public saw as a dazzling performance of love and betrayal on stage was, behind the scenes, a reflection of the complex tensions that can arise when fame, ego, and gossip intertwine in the Nashville spotlight. It all began in 1993 when Reba, already a superstar, was searching for a partner to record a dramatic new ballad about two women entangled with the same man. The song's emotional intensity demanded chemistry, contrast, and conviction. Reba could have chosen any of Nashville's top names, but she surprised everyone by picking Linda Davis, a talented but relatively unknown singer who had been struggling to break through. When Does He Love You was released, it exploded. The song rocketed up the charts, won a Grammy Award, and became a staple of Reba's live shows. The performance was pure fire. Two women trading lines like verbal daggers, their voices building toward a final, devastating crescendo. But the realism of that emotional duel was exactly what sparked whispers across Nashville. At the time, Reba's marriage to her manager Narvel Blackstock was under scrutiny, and gossip columns speculated that the song's lyrics, Does He Love You Like He Loves Me?, mirrored real-life tensions. Rumors spread that Reba's choice of Linda Davis was more than musical, that it was laced with suspicion. To make matters more complicated, Linda's husband, Lang Scott, was part of Reba's touring band, which only added fuel to the fire. Neither woman ever publicly confirmed any personal animosity, but those close to the industry described a quiet frost that lingered for years. Behind the smiles and the award show appearances, there was a palpable sense of competition. Reba was the queen of country, fiercely protective of her image and career. Linda, meanwhile, was forever branded as the other woman, both in the song and unfairly, in the eyes of many fans. As time passed, the tension softened. Both women continued their careers, and Does He Love You remained a defining masterpiece, though it forever carried the aura of its whispered feud. Decades later, Reba revisited the song in a new duet version, this time with Dolly Parton, a move some fans interpreted as symbolic closure to an old chapter. In the end, the feud between Reba McEntire and Linda Davis was less about hostility than perception. How one song blurred the boundary between art and reality. It reminded Nashville that even the most beautiful harmonies can hide discord underneath. And for Reba and Linda, their unforgettable duet became both a triumph and a wound. Proof that sometimes the music is just too real. 11. Willie Nelson vs. RCA Nashville, The outlaw who walked away before Willie Nelson became the beloved icon with the braids, bandana, and unmistakable voice of freedom, he was just another struggling songwriter stuck in the Nashville machine. In the 1960s, RCA Records controlled almost every aspect of his career: the producers, the arrangements, even the musicians he was allowed to use. His songs were polished, stripped of their soul, and molded into the Nashville sound, a slick formula of strings and background vocals meant to please radio audiences. It was commercial. It was clean. It was everything Willie Nelson wasn't. Willie had already written hits for others: Crazy for Patsy Cline, Nightlife for Ray Price, Funny How Time Slips Away. But his own albums failed to catch fire. RCA executives couldn't understand him. They tried to make him a conventional country crooner, dressing him in suits and cutting away his rough edges. They didn't see the quiet genius behind his unconventional phrasing, his jazz-like timing, and his deep conversational storytelling. Willie grew frustrated, boxed in by a system that didn't let him breathe. In 1972, he'd had enough. After a string of disappointing releases, he walked into RCA's office and asked to be released from his contract. They thought he was done. Another failed Nashville dreamer walking away from the biggest label in country. They couldn't have been more wrong. Willie packed up his family, left Tennessee, and went home to Texas, to Austin, where the air was freer, the bars were rowdier, and the music was unfiltered. It was there that Willie truly came alive. Surrounded by bikers, hippies, and honky-tonk heroes, he embraced his identity as an outsider. With no corporate producers controlling his sound, he blended country, folk, and rock into something entirely new. His 1973 album, Shotgun Willie, was raw, defiant, and unlike anything Nashville had ever heard. Critics hailed it as revolutionary. The follow-ups, Phases and Stages and Red-Headed Stranger, cemented him as the face of the outlaw country movement. Back in Nashville, RCA watched in disbelief. The artist they'd dismissed as unmarketable had become a legend on his own terms. Willie's success was more than personal vindication. It was a wake-up call for the entire industry. He proved that authenticity could sell, that freedom could be profitable, and that the system didn't own the soul of country music. His feud with RCA wasn't loud or bitter. It was quiet rebellion, the kind that leaves lasting scars. By the time Nashville tried to embrace him again, it was too late. Willie had outgrown the town that once tried to contain him. His career became a symbol of independence, his music a declaration of artistic sovereignty. In walking away from RCA, Willie Nelson didn't just save himself. He saved country music from suffocating under its own rules. His feud was not fought in headlines, but in choices, and those choices forever changed what it meant to be a country artist. Nachstarb 12. The CMA versus the Country Outlaws, the Civil War inside Nashville. By the mid-1970s, country music was standing at a crossroads, torn between two worlds. On one side stood the Country Music Association, CMA, and the Nashville establishment, the guardians of tradition, image, and commercial safety. On the other were the Outlaws, a rebellious movement led by Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson, and Johnny Cash, who rejected the system's control and demanded authenticity, autonomy, and artistic truth. What began as creative frustration soon erupted into an all-out ideological war that split Nashville down the middle. The CMA, formed in 1958, had long prided itself on protecting the wholesome image of country music. Their shows celebrated clean suits, polite smiles, and predictable formulas, the kind that sold well in supermarkets and television specials. But by the early 1970s, that polished version of country had begun to feel stale. The youth of America was restless. Rock, folk, and the counterculture were reshaping the sound of rebellion, and Nashville's rules suddenly seemed outdated. The spark that ignited the feud came when Waylon Jennings refused to let label executives dictate his sound. His landmark album Honky Tonk Heroes, 1973, produced his way, recorded with his own band, became a rallying cry. The CMA dismissed it as a dangerous deviation, but fans loved it. Then came Willie Nelson, who, after leaving RCA, scored massive success with Red-Headed Stranger, an album the Nashville suits had called too raw to sell. It sold over 1 million copies. As the Outlaws' popularity grew, the CMA's grip on the genre weakened. When Wanted, The Outlaws, featuring Waylon, Willie, Jesse Coulter, and Tom Paul Glaser, became the first country album ever to go platinum in 1976. It wasn't just a commercial milestone, it was a declaration of victory. The establishment had lost control of its own kingdom. But instead of embracing the movement, the CMA fought back quietly. The Outlaws were often snubbed at award shows, ignored by radio programmers, and criticized for their long hair, rough lifestyles, and rebellious attitudes. Nashville executives worried they were tarnishing the image of country music, turning it into something wild and unpredictable. The Outlaws didn't care. They wore rejection like armor. Waylon famously skipped CMA rehearsals, Willie played to hippie crowds in Austin, and Cash used his TV show to bring outlaws and outsiders into living rooms across America. By the end of the decade, the feud had reshaped country music forever. The CMA eventually realized that what they had tried to suppress had become the lifeblood of the genre. The Outlaws had brought in new fans, new money, and new credibility. They had proven that country could be dangerous, poetic, and deeply human again. In the grand history of Nashville, this wasn't just a feud. It was a civil war for the soul of the genre. The CMA may have built the house, but the Outlaws reminded everyone who it truly belonged to: the artists, the dreamers, and the defiant hearts who refused to be tamed.